The kitchen was hushed at dusk, the kind of soft quiet that feels like a blanket. I had set the old wooden table with careful hands. 2 plates, 2 folded napkins, and 2 chairs pulled out just a little, waiting for Daniel and Maya. The candles flickered like small hearts. The lemon cake rested on the counter, still cooling, the sweet smell joining the gentle hum of the kettle and the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. Before I begin, my dear friends, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps me feel like you're right here at my table, keeping me company while I share this. I wish I could pour a cup of tea for you and say, stay a while. I wish I could hand you a slice of cake and tell you how birthdays used to feel in this house. When the children were small, birthdays were loud and bright. We sang off-key and clapped too much. There were paper streamers taped crookedly to the walls and little handprints in frosting left on my apron. In those days, the table was always full, even when the food was simple. Tonight, the chairs looked at me like questions. I tried to smile, but my mouth trembled. I checked the time again. I listened to the water in the kettle and the tick of the clock and thought, maybe they are just 5 minutes away. It was my birthday evening and I had been waiting. They had promised to come. They had said, yes, Mom, we'll be there. And I believed them because I always do. I kept the soup warm and turned the chicken once more. I folded the napkins again because my hands needed something to do. I will tell you the whole story, gently and true, because the truth that came the next morning was heavier than anything I could carry alone. It sat down in the empty chairs and made me see our lives with new eyes. But before I reached that morning, let me take you back. Let me tell you about my days, my children, and how this table learned to hold both love and silence. My mornings begin with the kettle. I stand by the sink and watch the water turn from calm to bubbling. While it heats, I push the curtains open and let the light in. The garden outside is small, but it is mine. Mint grows by the steps, and the tomato vines climb as if they have places to be. After breakfast, I put on my cardigan and step outside to water the plants. The hose makes a soft, steady hiss, and the soil drinks it like a secret. Mr. Collins, my neighbor, raises his hand from his porch. He wears the same cap every day, and it suits him. "Morning, Ruth," he calls. "Morning, Mr. Collins," I answer. "The roses are waking up nicely." "They are," he says, nodding with pride as if they were his too. "You have the touch." His small kindnesses steady me. We do not talk long, but it is enough. I go back inside and tidy the kitchen. I wipe the counters and put the mugs away. The house wakes up in little pieces, and I hum without noticing. On my fridge door, there are old photos tucked under magnets shaped like fruit. Daniel at 8, his hair sticking up, his front teeth missing, grinning at the camera as if joy was his whole job. Maya at 6, holding a paper crown she made herself, her eyes bright like 2 small lamps. There are postcards too, and a faded recipe card in my mother's hand. Every morning I look at those faces and whisper, "Hello, my loves." When Daniel was small, he wanted to fix things. He took apart the remote control and lined up the tiny screws like treasures. He once came home from a school concert with mud all over his shoes. "Daniel," I said, trying to sound stern, "what happened to the clean path?" He shrugged and laughed. "The clean path was boring, Mom." I wanted to scold him more, but I kissed his head instead. Maya was my daydreamer. She would color for hours, her tongue peeking out at the corner of her mouth while she focused. She loved to help me bake, and by help I mean sneak bits of frosting when she thought I was not looking. "I saw that," I would say, and she would widen her eyes with pretend shock. "No, you didn't." We both laughed every time. Lemon cake became our family ritual almost by accident. One year I was short on chocolate, and all I had was a bowl of lemons sitting stubbornly on the counter. I grated the zest, mixed in sugar, butter, and eggs, and the whole house filled with a scent that felt like sunshine. The children licked the mixing spoon and swore it was the best cake in the world. After that, it was our birthday cake, every year, no matter what. Paul and I met when we were young and soft, when everything still felt possible. He carried my boxes up 3 flights of stairs when I moved into my first tiny apartment. We ate dinner on the floor before the furniture came. It was a good start, simple and sweet. We were not perfect, but we held hands and moved forward anyway. Life was not unkind, but it was not always easy. We worked, we raised 2 children, we put meals on the table. Somewhere along the way, our words grew fewer. There were no big storms, just a lot of quiet. We learned how to live next to that quiet, and then one day it told us to live apart. We did not speak badly of each other to the children. We chose care over blame. But silence still left its marks. The children adjusted in their own ways. Daniel grew careful with his feelings. He watched the room before he spoke. He became an electrician and liked that wires made sense when people did not. He met Tessa, who is polite and kind and loves him in a clear, steady way. She is careful about their space. She likes to plan. I respect that. I tell myself I do not want to be the mother who drops by without asking. Maya stayed bright, but her light scattered in many directions. She took a job at a bakery because sweet things made her feel safe. She said it was not forever, just for now, and then now stretched and stretched. She is often late but always arrives with warmth. "Sorry, Mom, I'm busy," she says, breathless, with a soft kiss on my cheek. I believe her every time because I know her heart. We have a family group chat. It is our small living room on our phones. I send photos of the garden, of the sky when it looks like cotton candy, of the bread I bake on Sundays. Daniel replies with a thumbs up or a short "nice, Mom." Maya sends a string of hearts and a picture of a cupcake with a face. Sometimes I see the little dots, the ones that say someone is typing, and I wait. Then the dots disappear. I do the same. I write, "Are you okay?" And then erase it, because I do not want to sound worried. 2 weeks before my birthday, I wrote in the chat, "How about dinner at my place, just the 3 of us? Lemon cake for dessert." I added a smiling face, and then I put the phone down as if it were hot. The dots appeared. A moment later, Daniel wrote, "Sounds good, Mom. What time?" Maya wrote, "Yes, I'll bring something fancy from work." I smiled alone in the kitchen and whispered, "Thank you." In the days that followed, I felt light. I went to the market with a list folded small in my pocket. I chose a chicken with smooth skin and a basket of firm potatoes. I picked herbs that smelled like clean rain. I touched the lemons one by one until I found the ones with bright, shiny skins. I did not rush. I let myself enjoy every little choice. At the bakery, I saw Maya behind the counter. She wore a pink apron and had flour on her cheek. "Hi, Mom," she said, handing a bag to a waiting customer. When there was a pause, I leaned forward and asked, "Saturday evening, sweetheart. Same time as always." "Yes, Mom," she said. "I'll be there, promise. I'll bring something for dessert, too." "I've got the cake," I said, and she laughed. "Of course you do," she said. "Then I'll bring something you can eat for breakfast." We shared a quick hug over the counter. Her arms felt thin and strong. "I love you," I whispered. "Love you, Mom," she answered, already turning back to the oven. On the way home, I passed Daniel's job site and considered stopping. I told myself not to. Later that evening, he called. "Do you need anything, Mom?" he asked, his voice a little rough from the day. "Just you," I said. "I'll be there," he replied. "Save me a big piece of cake." "I will," I promised. It felt good to promise something sweet and certain. The day before my birthday, I polished the old wooden table until it reflected the kitchen light like a small pond. That table has been with us through every season. It held baby bottles, homework, Sunday roasts, and bowls of soup when fever came through the house. It has scratches from toy cars and a ring from a forgotten hot mug. I run my fingers over those marks and think of all the hands that rested there and all the words we did not say. I took the good plates down from the top shelf and washed them even though they were already clean. I folded the napkins into soft rectangles and smoothed each one. I set out the salt and pepper as if they were small guests. I put fresh flowers into a jar, little white daisies, and placed them in the center of the table like a smile. While the chicken marinated, I mixed the lemon cake. I grated the zest, and the peel let go of its scent like a secret it had been holding tightly. Sugar, eggs, butter, flour, and then the spoon moved in slow circles. I poured the batter into the pan and scraped every last bit with a rubber spatula the children once fought over. I slid it into the oven and set the timer. The whole house filled with a gentle sweetness that made memory feel close enough to touch. As the cake cooled, I turned on the radio and found a station that played old songs. I hummed along, soft and happy. I wiped the counters again and then again because I needed something to do with my hands. I laid out the serving spoons and the plates for the cake. I checked the candles to be sure they would light. I tried to remember where I put the box of matches, then laughed when I found them where they always are. In the afternoon, Mr. Collins knocked on my door with a card. "Early wishes," he said shyly. "I won't bother you tomorrow, family time." "Thank you," I said, touched. "Would you like a piece of cake tomorrow? I can put one aside." "I'd like that," he said. "You always bake with love." "I do," I answered and felt it was true. That night I laid out my favorite sweater and set my phone on the charger, ready for any small messages. I tucked myself into bed with a calm heart. I pictured Daniel's tall shape filling the doorway and Maya's quick steps on the path. I saw the chairs pulled close. I heard our laughter in my mind. It was simple and sweet, just like I wanted. When morning came, I opened the curtains and watched the light rise over the garden. I made tea and held the warm mug with both hands. I moved through the house slow and happy. The day felt like a ribbon being unrolled. I told myself, this will be a good day. I believed it with all my soft and hopeful heart. A few weeks before my birthday, small things began to shift. It was not a storm. It was a light wind changing direction. A text would come late or not at all. A plan would be made and then moved. I told myself these things happen. Still, something inside me tilted and listened. Daniel's phone seemed to die more often. I would call and hear the flat ring and then nothing. Hours later, he would text, "Sorry, Mom, battery died, long day." I tapped out, "No problem," with a smile face, and then I sat at the table a little longer than I needed to. I thought about how people can be close and far at the same time. Maya would send a photo from the bakery of a tray of tiny tarts lined up like soldiers. I would answer with a heart and a "proud of you." Then I would say, "Can I bring you some soup after your shift?" and watch the little dots appear. Sometimes they disappeared without a reply. Later, she would write, "Sorry, Mom, got busy. Love you." I told myself that love was the part that mattered. There were small, polite, "Can we rain check?" messages. A coffee we meant to have became a phone call we did not make. A phone call became a promise to talk on the weekend. The weekend came and went, and no one said much about it. I filled my time with slow chores and let the quiet sit beside me. One morning, I walked to the bakery and found Maya at the counter. The glass case shone with sugar. She had flour on her cheek, and her hair was pinned back with 2 clips. I waited until the last customer left, then leaned close so I would not have to speak loudly. "Saturday evening, sweetheart," I said. "Same time as always." "Yes, Mom," she said, quick and warm. "I'll be there, promise. I'll bring something for dessert, too." "I've got the cake," I said with a soft laugh. "But bring whatever you like." "Okay, sounds good," she said. Her eyes darted to the oven, then to the door, then back to me. She smiled, but it felt like she was standing on one foot. I reached for her hand and squeezed it once, then let it go so she could run back when the timer went off. Another day, I made a pot of chicken soup the old way, with thyme and noodles and a bay leaf. I put some in a jar and drove it over to Daniel's place. I did not text first. I told myself it would be a quick drop-off, just a minute at the door. When I rang the bell, Tessa answered, polite as always. She holds herself like a person who has learned how to keep a tidy life. "Oh, you didn't have to, Ruth," she said, taking the jar. "I had extra," I said, and it was true. "It smells nice in here." "Thank you, Daniel's been busy," she said. She looked over her shoulder toward the hallway, then back at me. There was a small crease between her eyebrows. "Everything all right?" I asked, softly. I did not want to push. I also did not want to walk away holding my questions like a clumsy bundle. "We're okay," she said. "Just a lot going on." "Okay," I said, and I smiled. "Tell him I love him." We hugged briefly. She was warm, careful. I walked back to my car and sat for a moment before starting the engine. There is a kind of silence that feels like it hums. I heard it then. A few days after that, I went to the grocery store for herbs and lemons. The store was bright and too cold, like a winter house. I turned down the produce aisle and saw them, Daniel and Maya, standing close, whispering near the apples. They did not see me right away. They were speaking quick and low, heads bent, as if the apples could listen. I pushed my cart closer and smiled. "Well," I said, "if it isn't my two favorite people." They both looked up at once. "Mom," Daniel said, stepping in for a hug. He smelled like clean sweat and work. Maya kissed my cheek. "You shopping too?" she asked, too bright. They stood a small step apart from each other, like they were saving space for a secret. "I am," I said. "Those gala apples look good. I might make a crumble." "That sounds nice," Daniel said. He glanced at his watch as if it had a message on it. "We have to run, Mom. Sorry, we'll call you later." "Of course," I said. I reached for apples and watched their backs walk away down the aisle. The cart felt heavy for a moment. I shook my head and kept moving. I told myself not to make a story out of grocery store air. But there was a small ache in me, like something I could not name had tapped on my heart and asked to come in. At home, I wiped the apples and set them in a bowl. I washed the herbs and patted them dry with a tea towel. I opened the group chat and typed, "Saw you two at the store. You looked busy. Hope everything's okay." I watched the little dots dance and stop. Then there was nothing. Later, a heart appeared on my message. No words. I tapped the heart back and put the phone face down. In the evenings, I sat at the kitchen table and made lists for my birthday dinner. I wrote chicken on one line and potatoes on the next. I wrote salad, then erased it, then wrote it again. I added lemon cake at the bottom with a small star beside it, as if I could bless it in advance. I decided to iron the tablecloth, the one with the tiny blue flowers. It always looks best with candles. Sometimes I stood in front of the fridge and looked at the old photos like they were a window I could step through. I saw Daniel's missing teeth, Maya's paper crown. I saw myself younger, with my hair darker and my face rounder, holding a cake high like a gift to the room. I breathed in and out, counted to 10, and told my heart to be patient. On the Wednesday before my birthday, Daniel called while I was folding towels. His voice sounded tired, but he tried to make it light. We spoke about the weather, his job, a new breaker they had to install. "Saturday," I said quietly. "Saturday," he confirmed. "We'll be there, save us cake." "I always do," I said. "Drive safe." On Friday, I stopped by the bakery again for bread. Maya was in the back, and a young woman I did not know stood at the counter. She told me Maya had gone on a delivery run and would be back soon. I waited for 10 minutes, then 15. I tapped my finger on the strap of my bag, then left a note on a napkin. "I was here. I love you. See you Saturday. Mom." I drew a small heart because I could. When I got home, there was a message from Maya. "Mom, I'm sorry. Busy day. See you tomorrow. I love you." I pressed my hand to the phone as if I could feel her through it. I told myself that love travels even when details are messy. I told myself that families move like tides. They go out. They come back. On the morning of my birthday, I put the chicken in to marinate. I crushed garlic and chopped herbs and rubbed them into the skin. My hands smelled like lemon and thyme. I sliced carrots into neat coins and peeled potatoes carefully, saving the skins to fry later. I made noodles the way my mother taught me, with patience and a steady hand. As the chicken roasted, I cleaned the spoons and polished them with a soft cloth. I set them in a row and watched their faces shine up at me from the metal. I laid out the good plates on the table and checked the candles, then put matches beside them. I folded the napkins into tidy rectangles and placed them just so. I took a step back and looked at it all with my hands on my hips, like a proud cook in a small kitchen. While the cake cooled on the counter, I imagined the first slice. It was always the same. I would cut a gentle triangle and lift it with a flat knife. I would set it on Maya's plate and say, "Careful, it's tender," and she would laugh because I say that every time. I would give Daniel a thick piece and watch him pretend not to be pleased. I rehearsed those moments in my mind like a favorite song. The afternoon sun slid across the floor and made a warm stripe. I put on my sweater and checked the time. The clock ticked its steady talk. I set my phone on the counter and turned the sound up so I would not miss a message. I poured a glass of water and took a sip. At 5:30, a text came. "Running a bit late, save us cake," Daniel wrote. I smiled and sent a heart. "Drive safe," I wrote. "Take your time." At 5:50, another text buzzed in. "Traffic, sorry Mom, be there soon," Maya wrote. I could see her rushing, her hair falling out of its clip. I sent, "Okay, sweetheart, I'll keep things warm." I stirred the noodles and kept the chicken in the oven at a low heat. I lit the candles when it got darker and then blew them out again because I did not want them to burn down before the door opened. The house smelled like lemon and herbs and clean hope. At 6:30, I checked the window. A car went by slowly and then turned the corner. I thought I heard footsteps on the path, but it was only the leaves moving. I smiled at myself and shook my head. "Patience," I said out loud. My voice sounded soft and old in the quiet room. At 7, the food was still warm, but not at its best. I took out 2 plates and set them on the stove. I lit the candles again and then turned one off because it sputtered. I sat at the table and picked up my phone. I typed, "Are you close?" and then erased it. I typed, "Do you need directions?" and erased that too. I did not want to sound anxious. I did not want to push anyone into anything. At 7:15, I called Daniel. The phone rang and then went to voicemail. "Hey, it's me," I said. "Dinner's ready whenever you are, no rush, love you." I hung up and called Maya. Her phone went to voicemail right away. "Sweetheart," I said, "just checking on you. Text me when you can, I love you." At 7:40, I stood on the porch and looked down the street. The air was cool and smelled like someone's wood fire. A cat slid along the fence with its tail high. A couple walked by, their heads close. I waited out there longer than I meant to, the key cool in my hand. I told myself perhaps they were parking. Perhaps they were carrying something heavy and would be here any minute. Inside, the candles burned low. The clock ticked. I put 2 plates on the table and then took them back to the counter because something about the empty places hurt my eyes. I poured myself a small glass of water and took slow sips. I felt the water in my throat and the silence in my ears. At 8, I lifted the lid on the pot and stirred the noodles again. I smiled for no one and said, "Still good." I placed the chicken on a platter and tucked foil around its edges to keep it warm. I touched the cake and felt its cool surface. I thought about cutting it and then put the knife down. At 8:30, I sat at the table with my hands in my lap. I listened to the refrigerator hum. I listened to the house breathe. I did not cry. I tried not to. I told myself that grown children have complicated lives. I told myself that it was better not to make it about me. I told myself they loved me even through their delays. At 8:45, I called again. Voicemail. The calls felt like small stones dropping into a deep well. I could not hear them land. I pressed my lips together and took a breath. I blew out the candles one by one, and a small line of smoke rose like a whisper. I waved the smoke away, and it curled back to me. At 9, I put a little noodle and a small piece of chicken on my plate. I sat down and ate slowly so that the food would have company. I chewed and swallowed and let the salt remind me I was here. I set my fork down and looked at the 2 empty chairs. I placed my hand on the table and spread my fingers. The wood was smooth and familiar. It did not move. It did not change. After I ate, I stood and wrapped 2 plates with foil. I wrote Daniel on a sticky note and stuck it to one. I wrote Maya on another and pressed it down. I cut 2 slices of cake and placed them on small plates and covered them too. I told myself they would taste even better tomorrow, like some things do. I left the 2 chairs pulled out, foolish as it sounds. It made me feel as if they had only stepped away for a moment. I went to the sink and rinsed my plate. I washed it with slow, circular movements and set it to dry. I wiped the counter and smoothed the tablecloth where my hands had creased it. I tucked the flowers back into their jar and whispered, "Stay." I checked my phone one last time before I turned off the kitchen light. No new messages, no missed calls. I stood in the doorway and looked at the room I loved. It looked back with its small lamp and the clock and the cake under its cover. "Tomorrow," I said quietly, as if speaking to someone sleeping. Then I walked to the living room, sat down on the couch, and listened until my own breathing slowed. The night grew deep and leaned in. The house settled with little pops and sighs. I went back to the kitchen and washed the serving spoons. I washed the bowls I had not used. I washed the cup I did not need to wash. I wiped the sink dry and folded the dish towel the way my mother did, into a neat square. I left the 2 chairs exactly where they were, pushed back a bit from the table. It was a small kindness to myself. It felt like leaving a door unlocked in case someone came home. The flowers were quiet. The cake sat like a promise that had not been kept and yet had not disappeared. I stood by the table and let my hand rest on the wood. There is a ring mark near the edge where a hot cup once made its memory. I touched that circle with my fingertips. It was smooth, but still there. I rubbed it slowly, round and round, as if I could warm it into telling me a story. Another empty chair rose up in my mind. Years back, on a day that had no candles. It was the chair where Paul used to sit with his coffee and his quiet papers. He had not pushed it back loudly. He had not thrown anything. He had simply stood one morning and said, "We are not what we were," and then the chair stayed empty. The children ate their cereal with big eyes. I cut toast into triangles and did not say much. The table held us all, even as we loosened our grip on each other. I did not hate Paul. It has been a long time since that question felt hot. We were young and then we were tired. We forgot how to turn toward each other. The quiet between us grew heavy like wet wool. We laid it down and walked away to dry off. We did not point fingers in front of the children. I think we both wanted to protect what was gentle. But the emptiness in his chair taught me the shape of absence. I never stopped feeling the outline of it. I turned off the kitchen light and left the small lamp in the living room on. It made a soft pool of gold on the rug. I pulled a blanket over my knees and sat on the couch. I planned to wait a little longer. Perhaps a message would come. Perhaps the key would turn in the lock and Daniel would say, "Mom, I'm sorry," and Maya would run in with a box from the bakery. These thoughts were small candles I lit and placed in my mind. The clock moved past 10, then 11. My phone lay on the coffee table face up. Once it lit with a news alert. It was not what I wanted. The house made its small clicking sounds. A car passed outside and then the night was quiet again. My eyes grew heavy. I do not remember when I drifted into a thin sleep. The lamp glowed beside me like a watchful friend. In the early gray of morning, when the sky is not yet blue, I woke to a knock at the door. It was a soft knock, like someone trying to be gentle with old wood. My heart started to jump in my chest. I pushed the blanket off and stood up. My legs felt unsteady. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Maya stood on the porch with her arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes looked big and swollen. Her hair was pulled into a messy knot, and her clothes looked slept in. Behind her, the street was empty and quiet. A car idled by the curb, and I thought I saw Tessa in the driver's seat, looking down at her hands. I opened the door. The cool morning slipped in. "Mom," Maya said. Her voice broke on the one word. "Come in," I said. "Come here." I pulled her close, and she fell against me like a tired bird. Her shoulders trembled under my hands. I led her inside and shut the door gently. Her shoes made small dirt crumbs on the mat. I did not mind. A moment later, there was another knock. Daniel came in, moving carefully as if his body hurt in places he could not see. He held a paper bag in his hand. His face was the color of the morning. "Mom," he said. The word sat heavy in the room. "Sit," I said, though I did not yet know if sitting would be easier. We went to the living room. They sank onto the couch together. I sat in the chair across from them. The space between us felt full and empty at the same time. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. He rubbed his hands together. He looked at the floor, then at me, then back at the floor. "Can we sit?" Maya asked, and then realized we already were. She gave a small, broken laugh and covered her mouth. Tears slid down and left clean lines on her skin. "Mom, I'm sorry." I did not ask, for what? I did not say, "Why didn't you call?" My questions stood in the doorway and waited. I reached for their hands and held them both. Their hands felt different from each other. One was warm and shaking. One was cold and still. "Tell me," I said very softly. "Tell me what happened." They looked at each other like two people on a small boat. Daniel nodded to Maya. She took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "Dad has been sick," she said. "He's been sick for a while now. It got worse these last weeks." I felt the words move across the room and sit down in the chair by the lamp. I did not speak. I held their hands a little tighter. I waited. "He asked us not to tell you," Daniel said, his voice low and steady in a way that made me want to hold him. "He didn't want to pull you back into those old days. He said he wanted to keep you safe from it. He said he would carry it." The ceiling seemed lower for a moment. The room shrank around us to make the words fit. I looked at the carpet. at the small thread that had pulled loose near the edge. I watched my breathing go in and out like waves on a slow sea. "Last night," Maya said, "it got bad suddenly. He was taken to the hospital. We went. We were there, Mom." Daniel lifted the paper bag and put it on the table. It made a soft crinkle sound. "We left in a hurry," he said. "I sent that text, and then everything went too fast. I should have called you. I didn't know how to say it. I'm sorry." "What did the doctors say?" I asked, though I did not want details. I think I asked because I did not know what else to do with the hole that had opened up at my feet. "They said it was time," Daniel said. He looked at his hands. He swallowed. "He asked about you. He asked what time it was. I told him it was your birthday." He closed his eyes and smiled a little. "He asked us to sing to you in our hearts," Maya said, crying now. He said he hoped you were having cake." She pressed her fist against her mouth. I leaned forward and put my hand on her knee. "He passed near midnight," Daniel said. His voice did not break. It was a soft kind of strong. "It was peaceful, Mom. We were there." I felt the words as if they were a slow wave moving through my body. They reached my chest and then my throat. I nodded. I did not cry right then. I think my heart was listening for something more. The night before sat behind me like a second person. The empty chairs, the quiet kitchen, my hands on the wooden table. It was not carelessness that left me alone. It was goodbye. Maya reached into her bag and took out a folded envelope. She held it with both hands and looked at it as if it might float away. Then she passed it to me. My name was on the front in a hand I knew. It had not changed much. The letters leaned the way they always did, as if tired. "He wrote this a few days ago," Daniel said. "He gave it to us and told us to bring it to you when it was time." I held the envelope like a fragile dish. The paper was a little wrinkled, as if someone had held it for a long time. I slipped my finger under the flap and opened it slowly. The sound of the tear was careful and clean. I unfolded the paper inside. The lines were slightly uneven, a bit of a shake that I remembered from the last time I had seen him, years ago, when he handed me a check for the children's school trip and said, "Tell them to have fun." I took a breath and began to read. "Ruth," it said, "if this reaches you, then I did not get to say these words out loud. I always thought I would, and then I kept waiting for the right day. I am sorry for that. I am sorry for many things." I paused, not to dramatize, but because I felt the words move through me like a small train. I let them pass. Then I continued. "I am sorry for the way I pulled away. I thought I was being strong. I thought silence was kindness. I know now that it was a kind of fear. We started in such a simple, hopeful way. Do you remember the first place we lived? The paint on the window that stuck in summer. Your laugh in the stairwell. I remember your lemon cake in a square pan because we could not afford a round one yet. You put it on a borrowed plate and lit 2 candles anyway and made our whole room bright." I wiped a tear that had slid onto the paper. It made a small wet mark, and I felt foolish, as if I had ruined something precious. Then I remembered the table and its ring mark and told myself that marks are part of love. "I have watched from a distance," the letter went on. "That sounds worse than I mean it. I do not mean I have been spying. I mean I have asked the children how you are, and when I happened to pass the street, I slowed down. I wanted to make sure your light was on. I do not deserve the comfort that gave me. I took it anyway. I hope that is not too much to confess." I paused again and looked up. Maya was watching me with soft eyes. Daniel was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, as if he could hold me up by sitting that way. I took another breath and went on. "I want to tell you that I never stopped caring. That feels thin, but it is true. I cared badly sometimes. I cared quietly often. I carried my shame like a heavy coat and then wondered why I was tired all the time. I am sorry for the ways that hurt you. I am sorry for the ways it made you small when you should have been allowed to be big. You were always softer and stronger than I knew how to say." The words made a wide space in my chest. They moved things around. I felt grief and something else, something like relief. The letter was not a miracle. It did not fix anything. But it was a hand held out across a long, quiet room. "I have been sick for a while," the letter said. "I did not want to make it your burden. That may not have been fair. I think I was afraid of your kindness. I am writing this in case the time comes when I cannot say it all at once. I have asked Daniel and Maya to look after you, not because you are not strong, but because I want them to know that caring for someone is not a debt. It is a privilege. I know you know this. You live it every day. I breathed, shallow and careful, as if the letter might blow away if I sighed too hard. The room was very quiet. Even the clock seemed to be listening. If you can forgive me, he wrote, please do. If you cannot, I understand. I forgive myself less easily than I forgive anyone else, but I am trying. I think that is what time is for, to try. If you still make that lemon cake, I hope you know that it is one of the best things I ever tasted. Not because of the crust or the icing, but because of the way your face looked when you put it down on the table. If there is a last image I carry, I want it to be that one. You, placing sweetness in front of the people you love. I held the page still and felt my throat ache. Tears came now, slow and steady. They did not rush. They did not crash. They moved like rain that had been in the sky a long time and finally found the ground. I wish you gentleness, the letter ended. I wish you a little garden and warm cloves and the hum of your kettle. I wish you light in the evenings. I wish you laughter with our children who are the best of us. I leave them my love. I leave you my apology. I know they are not the same size. I hope they are both useful in their way. Goodbye, Ruth. Thank you for the years that were good. With respect and love in the only way I know how to say it now. Paul. I folded the letter along its soft lines and held it for a long moment. My hands shook a little. I placed it on my lap and laid my palm flat on top as if to keep it from flying off. I did not feel anger. I did not feel relief in the way a movie would show relief. I felt older and very tired and full of something that did not yet have a clear name. Maya scooted closer and put her head on my shoulder. Daniel reached across the small table and touched my knee the way boys do when words are hard. I looked past their faces at the kitchen doorway. The chairs were still pulled back. The flowers were still standing. The cake was still under its cover. I felt the edge of the table in my mind, and for a moment it was like a hand resting against mine. It was not the past. It was not the future. It was a quiet touch in the present. I turned my face and kissed Maya's hair. I reached for Daniel's hand and squeezed it once. There were things to do, I knew, calls to make, arrangements to hear about, words to say to people who would tilt their heads and speak softly. But for that small time, we sat and breathed and let the truth find its place among us. The empty chairs in my kitchen were no longer a judgment. They were part of a goodbye I had not been told was happening. I was sorry I had been alone with my waiting. I was also grateful, though that sounds strange, that I had been in my kitchen with my cake cooling and my flowers open, when he left this world asking about my birthday. It is a gentle thing to carry, this thread between sorrow and sweetness. I held it carefully, like a piece of lace that had made it through the wash. I looked at my children and thought, they are good. They are trying. They made imperfect choices inside a hard moment. I wanted to tell them that right away, to lift the heavy coat off their shoulders. That would come. But first, we sat with the letter and the morning and the small sounds of our house that was still here, holding us, the way a good table does. We moved to the kitchen without speaking much. The morning light pooled on the table like milk. I set out 3 mugs and filled the kettle. It made its soft hum, then a breathy sigh when it finished. I reached for the tea and the little jar of honey because doing helped me breathe. We sat down, the 3 of us, the chairs where they should be, the tablecloth a little wrinkled. No one rushed. The clock near the fridge took its slow steps. Outside, a bird hopped along the fence and pecked at something only it could see. I wrapped my hands around my mug and let the warmth travel into me. "You should have called," I said. My voice sounded small, but it was steady. I kept my eyes on my tea so they would not feel trapped by mine. "We didn't know how," Daniel said. He looked at his hands. He rubbed his thumb over a knuckle as if the answer might be tucked there. "We thought we were protecting you," Maya whispered. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand like she used to as a girl, then frowned at herself and reached for a napkin. "I was alone here," I said. I looked up then and met their eyes. "But I understand, I do." They began to apologize again. The words came in fits and starts. "I'm sorry, Mom," Maya said, and the way she said Mom made me want to pull her into my lap like I used to. "I should have told you sooner," Daniel said, his voice husky. "I should have come back even for 10 minutes. I held up my hand not to stop them but to slow us all down. It was a hard night, I said. You made choices inside a hard night. I can see that. I can love you inside that. I stood and walked around the table and put my hand on Daniel's shoulder. Then I leaned and put my other hand on Maya's. I forgive you, I said, simple as that. They both let out a breath at the same time, like two small winds. Daniel covered my hand with his for a second. Maya pressed her cheek against my wrist. The kettle clicked as it cooled. The house seemed to settle a little, as if it had been waiting for those words too. Daniel nodded toward the paper bag he had brought. It's just some rolls, he said. Tessa stopped for them. She's in the car. We didn't know if you would want people. Ask her to come in, I said. If she wants to, there is always room here. Maya stood. I'll go, she said and slipped outside. The door closed with a soft click. Daniel and I sat quietly for a moment. I didn't know he was so bad, I said, and I meant it as a thought more than a question. He didn't talk about it, Daniel said. He would say he was fine. He would say he was just tired. When we pushed, he would change the subject. And then these last weeks, he looked smaller. He swallowed. He asked about you, but he wouldn't let us call. I can hear him saying that, I said. It was not bitter, only clear. He thought silence was protection. He always did. Maya came back with Tessa. Tessa's eyes were damp, and her mouth was set in that way it takes on when she is trying to be brave. Ruth, she said softly, I'm so sorry. I know, I said. I reached for her hand too. She squeezed it, careful and firm. Sit with us, I added. Have tea. She slid into the chair beside Daniel and folded her hands on the table. He asked me to keep an eye on Daniel, she said with a tiny smile that had a shake in it. As if I don't already. That sounds like him, I said, trying to make sure everyone is looked after, even when he kept himself far. I poured tea into her mug and pushed the honey toward her. I'm glad you are here. We ate the rolls without much taste, but the act of eating helped. We passed the honey. We wiped crumbs from our fingers. The morning moved along the wall, inch by inch. The flowers on the table lifted their faces, and I felt grateful for their simple faith in the sun. Tell me something about last night, I said. Something small. I want to picture him, not only the machines. He kept asking for water, Maya said. He would take a sip and say, that's good, like it was the first water he had ever had. He asked what time it was, Daniel added. He wanted to know if it was after 9. I told him it was your birthday. He closed his eyes and smiled. He said, lemon cake, and then he fell asleep for a while. He asked us to sing to you in our hearts, Maya said, and a small laugh slipped out with her tears. It was so like him and not like him at the same time. I'm glad he thought of cake, I said. It sounds small, but it is not. It is a way he tied himself to us in that room. I looked at the covered cake on the counter. I felt both pain and dear love when I saw it. He loved sweetness, I added, even when he pretended he didn't. We talked a little more, and the talk gentled us. Then the table grew quiet again. None of us felt the need to fill every space. I stood up and carried the letter back to the kitchen and placed it in the drawer where I keep recipes and spare keys. It felt like the right place for it. Close, but not under my pillow. When I came back, I said, I want to go to the service. I do not want anger to walk beside me anymore. I want peace. Saying it out loud steadied me. I felt it settle into my bones. Daniel nodded. We thought you might, he said. It will be small. The chaplain said we could use the hospital chapel on Tuesday morning. He didn't want anything big. That sounds right, I said. He was never one for show. I looked down at my hands. I want to write him a note, I said, surprising myself with how much I already knew what I wanted to do. Just a few words. I want to tuck it in my coat and carry it there. You can give it to the chaplain, Tessa said. They have a way to take care of things like that. Good, I said. That helps. The rest of the morning turned into small needed tasks. Tessa made more tea and washed the few cups we had used, even when I said I could do it. Daniel stepped outside to call someone from the hospital. Maya sat with a pen and a pad and made a list, then crossed things off, then made another list. Who to tell, when to meet, what to wear. I stood and watched them move through my house with care. I felt a soft pride in their kindness. When they had to go, I walked them to the door. On the porch, I kissed each cheek. "We will be okay," I said, and I meant it in a way that did not try to rush grief. "Go home and sleep a little if you can. Eat something that tastes like the ground. Soup, bread." I squeezed Tessa's hand again. "Thank you for looking after my boy," I added, "and for letting me look after you all too." "Always," she said. "We're family." When they drove away, the quiet rushed back in, but it did not feel as sharp. I made myself a simple lunch. I sliced an apple and buttered a piece of bread. I ate at the table and let the food do its small work. After that, I took out a piece of plain paper and my best pen. I wrote, "Dear Paul," and then stopped. The words felt heavy and tender. I thought of the letter he had sent me. I thought of our early kitchen with its stuck window and the lemon cake in a square pan. I thought of the children's faces last night and this morning. I wrote, "Thank you for the years that were good." Then I wrote, "I forgive you," and sat with those 3 words for a while. I wrote, "I forgive myself for the ways I held too tightly to what had already walked away." I wrote, "I am okay. The children are okay." I wrote, "I will make lemon cake on days that need light and think of all the sweetness that is not in a bowl but in a room, in faces, in small jokes at a table." I added, "I wish you gentleness where you are." I did not know if it reached. I wrote it anyway. Then I signed my name the way I do on birthday cards, with a small heart, not to be cute, but because that is my way of placing warmth on a page. I folded the paper and pressed the crease with my thumb. I slipped it into my coat pocket and patted it once, like you do with your keys before you leave the house. Tuesday came with an early cloud. I ironed a plain dress and put on the pearl earrings my mother gave me. I brushed my hair and kept it simple. I placed the note in my pocket and touched it again. I whispered, "Come with me," to no one and to everything. Then I took my scarf and my bag and locked the door. At the hospital chapel, the light fell through a tall window and made a gentle shape on the floor. There were a few chairs, a small table, a vase with white flowers, a thin cross on the wall but not too high. The room smelled faintly of wood polish and something clean. A woman in a simple black dress stood by the door and nodded to us. "Whenever you are ready," she said. Daniel and Maya stood on either side of me. Tessa sat behind us, her hand on Daniel's shoulder. The chaplain spoke a few words about kindness and time. She did not say more than needed. She did not try to dress the moment in big language. "You loved him," she said. "He loved you." That was the truth, even if some of that love had been quiet and bent around corners. I stepped forward and placed my note where she showed me, under the flowers on the small table. I laid my hand flat on the wood for a moment. "Goodbye," I said softly. My voice did not shake. It did not need to be loud. I closed my eyes, saw our first kitchen again, and opened them to this one. The light did not argue with my eyes. It just was. Maya cried with the kind of tears that come like rain in the afternoon, steady and without storm. Daniel stood very still and then lost his stillness and let his face fall. I reached for both their hands and held on. No speeches, just a squeeze and another, and the shared breath of 3 people who knew the backside of love and were still grateful to have known the front. When it was over, we stood outside for a moment. The sky had opened into a soft blue. People moved around us with their own days. We held each other and then let go. "Come back to my place," I said. "There is cake. It is a day old, but it is still sweet." Back home, I put on the kettle, because that is what I do when I do not know what to do. I took the cake out and set it on the table. I reached into the cupboard and pulled down 3 plates, then, without thinking, a 4th. I put the 4th on the table and stared at it. I stood still with the extra plate in my hand. It felt light, almost silly, like a prop I had brought into the wrong play. Then I understood something quiet. Extra plates belong in memories now, not on tables. I put it back gently and closed the cupboard door. We sat. I cut the cake. The first slice for Maya, as always. The second thick for Daniel. The third for me. The knife made a soft sound against the plate. "Careful," I said, and Maya smiled with wet eyes because I always say that. We ate slowly. The cake was dense now, settled. The lemon still lifted to meet us. We did not talk much. We did not need to. The kitchen was enough. The chairs were enough. The 3 plates were enough. After a while, Maya whispered, "Happy birthday, Mom." Daniel echoed it a little louder. "Happy birthday, Mom." It was late. It was soft. It was exactly right. I smiled with eyes that had already cried enough for now. "I'm glad we are here," I said. "I am glad for the years that brought us to this table, even the hard ones because they taught us how to sit with each other and not run away." Daniel nodded. "I'll come by this weekend," he said. "The porch step is a little loose. I noticed it earlier." He smiled a small smile. "I'll fix it. Dad would, he'd tease me if I didn't." "He would," I said. "He would say, 'Don't let your mother trip.'" I looked around at the corners of the room. "I won't." We packed leftovers into small containers and labeled them with a marker. Maya drew a tiny heart on one because she cannot help that kind of thing. Tessa washed the knife and dried it and set it in the drawer with care. We moved like a practice, like a family that knows how to clean up together. When it was time to go, I walked them to the door again. The evening had settled around the house. "Call me when you get home," I said, but I did not say it like a demand. I said it like a hand reaching out, palm up. "I love you," I added, and it felt like a warm coat around all of us. We stood on the steps and hugged. For a second, I thought of lighting a candle in the window the way my grandmother used to. Not as a signal, not as a promise, just as a small light between people who are going out into the dark and people who will be here when they return. When the house was quiet again, I washed the 3 plates we had used and set them in the rack. I wiped the tablecloth with a damp cloth and smoothed it with both hands. I blew out the candle we had lit for tea and watched a thin thread of smoke curl and lift. "Good night," I said to the room. "Thank you." I turned off the light and let the dark be gentle. In the weeks that followed, the days found a calmer shape. The mornings were still mine, kettle, garden, a slow walk to the mailbox. The afternoons did not lean so hard against me. I moved through rooms with a steady heart. I spoke softly to the photos on the fridge and felt less alone. The children called more, not from guilt, but from love that had learned something. Daniel would ring at odd hours between jobs, the sound of his truck door closing in the background. "Is this a good time?" he would ask. "Yes, it is," I would answer. We would talk about little things. Weather, wires, his socks that went missing in the dryer, which I told him is the fate of socks in every house. Maya learned to text, "Do you have time for a quick call?" instead of just calling. I learned to say, "Not now, sweetheart, but in an hour," when I was in the bath or on the phone with the pharmacy. It felt like a small, strong kindness we gave each other, learning where one person ends and another begins and loving all the same. Sometimes they would stop by, but I stopped arriving without warning. I would text, "Is this a good time?" and wait. "Yes, Mom," they would reply, or "Can we do 6?" And I found I liked the waiting because it made the arriving clear. Tessa would send a message with a photo of a new plant she had bought and ask me for advice about sun. I would reply with too many tips and a smile. She would answer with a leaf emoji and a thank you. The lemon cake became a gentle ritual again, not only for birthdays now. On evenings when tenderness was needed, I would pull out the lemons and the sugar. Maya came early once and zested them while I measured. We stood shoulder to shoulder, working in easy silence. When we slid the pan into the oven, she leaned her head on my arm for a breath and said, "This smell feels like home." Daniel came another evening after a long day. He sat on a stool and I put a piece of cake in his hand before he could ask. He ate half standing up and closed his eyes. "Everything is better," he said, "when something is sweet and someone is kind." He left with 2 slices wrapped in foil, one for Tessa and one, he said, "for the road which I will pretend is for tomorrow." Mr. Collins brought the mail one afternoon when my hands were covered in flour. He set it on the porch table and stood with his cap in his hands. "I heard," he said. "I'm sorry, Ruth." I nodded and touched his sleeve. "Thank you," I said. He cleared his throat. "About that cake piece you promised," he added. I laughed and it sounded like a window opening. "Come by after supper," I said. "There will be plenty." On a Sunday, I went to the little service at our church, sat in the back near the end of a pew. The hymn was one I knew by heart. I sang softly. I felt my voice move through the notes like a careful bird. I did not think about big things. I thought about the way light found the side of the pew, about the dust that rose and fell in it. I whispered, "Thank you," into my hands and let it be enough. When my next birthday came around, we tried something new. No big dinner. no polished spoons. In the evening, we carried tea to the back steps and sat close enough to touch and far enough to breathe. The air was cool. The garden smelled like mint and tomato leaves. Somewhere, a neighbor played an old song, and it drifted over like a memory that had taken its shoes off. We talked about the year in small pieces. Daniel said he learned that it is okay to say, "I don't know what to do right now." Maya said she learned that saying, "I'm sorry," is not the end of a sentence, but the beginning of being together. I said I learned that waiting is a kind of love when it is not punishment. We let those sentences sit between us until they felt worn in. I lit one candle and set it on the step between us, not as a signal to anyone, not as a promise we could fail to keep, just as a simple light we could share for a little while. We watched it flicker. We didn't rush to blow it out. When it did go out, all on its own, we did not sigh. We just looked at each other and smiled because the light had been enough for as long as we needed it. If you are listening to me now, sitting in your own kitchen or lying in bed with the dark soft around you, I want to tell you this. Sometimes the chairs at our tables are empty. Sometimes we wait, and the waiting hurts. Sometimes the truth arrives the next morning and breaks us open. Even then, or maybe especially then, there is love moving quietly through the room. Ask when you are uncertain. Forgive when you can. Keep a soft place at your table for the people you love, no matter what yesterday held. Use your good plates on an ordinary night. Light a candle because light is good, even when no one is watching. Make a cake if you like, or slice an apple or pour tea. Tend to the small kindnesses. They are the stitches that keep us together. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for listening to my story with your gentle heart. I picture you here at my table, and I wish you a warm cup, a chair that fits you, and someone to share your quiet with. If tonight hurt you a little in your own memories, I am holding your hand in mine, in the way stories allow. Good night, my friends. Be gentle with yourselves.